Alrighty, here it's me, it's Shucker Patty, and this is
Beyo with Hog Island.
And we're at
Hog Island Oyster Company.
And what bay is this?
This is Tomales Bay.
Tomales Bay at Hog Island, which is one of my bucket lists forever. This is my first time here, which is sort of embarrassing, but it's hard to get everywhere all the time. And this place so far, it's one of those magical little. You hear about it. You hear about, oh, you can have a picnic and you can grab some oysters and you can be in nature and enjoy a little bit of this and that. And but this is all that in a bag of chips. Do you serve bags of chips?
We do actually have bags of chips.
They have bags of chips. So it is all that in a bag of chips. And here we go. What we have here in front of us is actually 4 species of the 5 that Hog Island grows, which is a stupendously rare thing to see as well. And what's super exciting is they have, of course, some gorgeous flats. I don't know if you can't pick it up, I'm sure. This is something that you'll only be able to experience in person, but the algae on the outside of it's got sort of a jade green hue to it and a shimmer. And that happens on their edgeless, the European flats. These are the East Coast oysters. We're the Hog Island Virginicus.
Hog Island
Virgins, Atlantics. So we call them Atlantics here, and that's what they are exactly, and they look fantastic. The classic Sweetwaters, Pacific oyster, Magellanic gigas with lots of fluting. Not fully tumbled. It is tumbled. It is roughed up, so it's got a smooth consistency, but you want to see some flutes.
Yeah, so those are out of our rack and bag version, and it's basically once a month. Our guys will go out there, flip all the bags, hit them with baseball bats to kind of rough them up, and that's how you get a stronger shell, without the tipping. So it is a little bit more labor intensive. But
yeah.
It's kind of how the farm was started, and so we want to keep that old.
Keep that tradition,
yep.
And it showcases in the style of shell that you're going to see, and again, one of the rarest of the rares, the Olympia oyster. And I got to say, this one here is reminiscent of say something with a lovely deep cup that I just saw here, but in a miniature size. It being a different species, of course, this is both off the Osteria family, and they have the sort of same shape and morphology to it, but gorgeous. So I'm super excited by this.
Yeah, the cool thing about those Olies, we actually created that brood stock out of parents that we found here in Tomales Bay. So you know how it is our one native oyster here. We're trying to bring back and restore them. So Gary, our kind of resident scientist, went out and chipped a bunch of little parents off the rocks, and we created our brood stock.
So there's nothing like a sense of locality other than the fact that the brood stock is actually from this area here.
Exactly.
And so that's another complete rarity. So if you see an Olympia oyster coming in from Hog Island, this is the water that it came from. And it's sort of, in the world of Scotch, you'd call it a single malt whiskey coming from that region versus a blend per se.
Yes, sir.
So this would be a single bed oyster coming from that bed, cultured, grown, and finished in this water. So this is as natural as you can get to Tomales Bay Olympia, because it is.
Yes, sir.
Holy shuck! I get a little verklempt at these moments. When I try oysters, I usually like to go. I do a 5 species tasting. When I like to do this, I like to start and stop with the Olympia.
Okay.
And there's a reason for this, because the palate, on a neutral palate, you want to understand the complexity of an Olympia, and you may miss that if you've just had 4 other oysters and a sip of something in between.
Exactly.
So what it does, if you do it at the start and the finish, you can see what happens to your palate and the change that happens over 4 or 5 oysters. So it's sort of starting and finishing. And I do it in ascending order of complexity. So I would start here, and then I would move here, and then move there, and then move here, and then finish with this.
Makes
So
sense to me.
do you want to play?
Yeah, let's try these.
Let's see. Now I'm having the oyster stout from the Hen House Brewing Company here, and it's using oysters from this region as well. It's fantastic. I guess not the best for clean palates, but hey, we've just had some gorgeous barbecued oysters too. We're just going to go at this. Olympias. That was the easiest opening oyster I've ever seen. Those darn seagulls that are all over the place already took care of that one. That is why I'm the fastest shucker. I shucked it and ate it and put it out there in one go. That's so funny. There's 2. That's 2 for 2.
This isn't looking good.
That's a good indication. This one's there. There we go. Look at that.
That is beautiful.
Isn't that a thing of beauty? What I love is always when you see this lovely green hue, the iridescence, the shininess within the mantle, but you got the green hue from the actual algae that it's eating.
Yep.
That's on the outside of the actual shell as well. This is the fun thing of Olympia. You have to use 2 fingers to hold it. So it's more of a difficult, it's still shuck it the same way, but it's more of a technique that you're going to be looking at. And look at I love the minerality and the darkness on that shell. See how this matches? See the dark ring right here? Yeah. Matches that dark ring right there. To me, that's a genetic thing. That's the hair color of this one little oyster as it is. And the green is in there as well. So
yeah.
Now again, for tasting, what I like to recommend for folks to do, slide it in, chew it up, and aerate. Breathing in through the mouth and retronasal through the nose, out the nose, so that really you effectively get that olfactory system working as well.
Exactly.
And this one is, normally I say on an oyster, it's a 2-bite chew. This is gonna melt. Olies tend to just basically break apart and melt on the palate. It's such a small, cheers.
Cheers.
Oh.
That was so good.
It's sauce would tend to overpower this at any given point in time, but this is such a delicate flavor of oyster, but yet so complex. We have a very subtle salinity off that, and then went right into a little bit of the butter, and then the vegetal and minerality comes through. Normally there's that dry tannic finish. This one is light on the tannic finish right now, which could be a time of year, but it's also absolutely brilliant, probably for the area as well. I'm gonna have to try 2. Because you can't just have one. No, what did you think?
I thought it was great. I tend to get a little bit kind of like a nuttiness on the after finish.
Love it. Yes, I can see that.
Really enjoy.
This is the petite of the petite. I think the Oli and the Kumo are those smaller grade oysters that other growers would see back in the history and say, hey, we can sell small oysters too. But these are oysters that only grow this big.
Yep.
Generally. Now, I fractured and killed that shell, so I'm going to eat this one.
You're pretty much lucky if you can get an Olympia up to a quarter, $half size.
Right. Here we go. This is an oyster back at Starfish. They only came in, and I tell my customers in Toronto, they're not a traveling oyster. They're just not. You can get them here, like you can get, what is it, May?
Yeah.
Like oily in May. So I'm having the oysters here now, but I wouldn't get them into Toronto till like November. And really November, December, January, maybe February, and that's it, it's done. 3 to 4 months out of the year. And I would tell customers, no, they're just such a rarity. There's very few growers that are doing it, and they don't travel that well. You can go to get them, but when they're strong enough, we'll get them in, but very rarely, and we'll get only a short stock. One customer found out, they tried it, they loved it, they saw that they came in, he walked in the door, he goes, oh, you have Olis? I'm gonna have 48 Olis, a bottle of Chablis, and don't talk to me. I was like, I'm not offended by number 3, I get it. And I just went to town, I went to work, got him his stuff, and he's just sat there for the afternoon and just like, and sipping, and there was nothing else. It was fantastic.
That's the beauty of what I really want to start to teach people and educate, because even out here, they don't know that this is our one native oyster.
Yes.
You know, and it's such a treat when they're on someone's menu, because it is very rare when you see Olympias on a menu these days.
This is the stuff where you would see this, and you would, here's a question. The story of the 1840s and the gold rush days, and then the overeating and overharvesting and sluicing and gold rush sluicing, killing off beds.
Yep.
This is the oyster that would have been then around at that point in time.
Exactly.
For the majority, maybe in an occasional 1 or 2 of these. But in this idea and concept of Hangtown Fry, my question is, what oysters were they using at that time of Hangtown Fry?
That's actually, I mean, if they were using the native Olympias, I don't know how you're cooking those guys to anything.
But you would start with, for one omelet, you'd need, 300 oysters?
At least.
300 mini little oysters to put it in. So I'm going to have to dig around a little bit more.
No, I would be curious on that.
Wouldn't it?
It is and the whole thing, once they started to deplete the oyster beds, it's a very finicky oyster.
Yeah.
It needs the perfect condition. So we've experienced it here where we were just trying every area to find where they can actually flourish, because it needs that perfect little mix of the right wind and wave action, good flow of food, and if you don't find it, they either get super stunted or they just all die off. So it's also a 2 to 3 year oyster. It's a lot of investment for such a tiny
a tiny little person. That was the hard thing back at the restaurant, is sort of explain to customers, no, I'm sorry, this is a $5 oyster. What are you talking about, $5? I know, it's very rare. If you don't want it, that's fine. I've got a lineup over here. So
yeah, exactly.
It's an experience more than it's a dining thing. This is where the gentleman, he's like, I'm going to take 48.
Well, and the cool thing, like what you were saying too, pretty rare to be having these in May as well. Because once those guys start spawning, they get really bad.
Yeah.
And normally, like how you were bringing them in November, December, January, that's the
time.
Premier
Time. See the flake of the shell as well. You're going to say that's the time of year as well, because the oyster's not quite strong enough.
Yep.
But such an interesting oyster, and that's another reason where I insisted no sauce or lemon on this. That was such a delicate flavor.
No, yeah, you need to be able to pick up
this time of year. It seems a little light. Like from memory, oldies can be a little bit bolder, but again, that's in the time of year that I would get them. I've never ever seen them in this time frame.
No, I'm actually really surprised that they're still in good condition right now.
And you can see that the spawn is getting there. Gonads are getting filled, so I think it's getting ready. Next oyster we're going to is the Virginicus, the East Coast oyster. And we have our friend the Crow would like to have some oysters. Cheers. Let's check this one out. Salinity is up. Little mushroom, little earthy. Very sweet though, eh?
No,
that sweetness comes through.
Exactly, and it's got that nice firm flesh too, which I really like. These are one of my favorite oysters because you get that salty pop in the beginning. It's a very firm, but it also kind of sweetens on that tail end.
Yeah. It's a classic East Coast oyster, salt and sweet, and then the complexity comes into your Pacifics, the West Coast, and all the other oysters as well. And this definitely has that. And I think, if anything, what you get from the West Coast is maybe just a hint of the minerality and maybe some seagrasses that you're coming from this region. And the green that's on the shell, I think, is a perfect example of environment affecting the flavor of the oyster when it comes through as well. Let's go to the Sweetwaters. And look at these, the depth of cup is wonderful. Sometimes these tend to have a bit of a thinner type of shell. Oh, look at this. The fun thing of oysters at this time of year as well, and this close to the water, you're going to see a lot of action and the wrinkling of the actual mantle. Wrinkles around a lot. It doesn't lay flat because it's still fresh from the water. So when I explain this to customers in the city, they're like, "Oh, it doesn't look normal." I go, "Yeah, because you're getting the traveled oyster, the well-traveled oyster." This one, see, look at it. Even though it's just open, you can see it's ruffling right here.
Yep.
And looking really good. Super hard shell, very nicely done, nicely grown. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There's that melon rind, the cucumber note coming through. It's funny how it's so indicative of such a species of oyster, but very clean. The salt comes through right about now, and the sweetness as well, which is nice coming off afterwards rather than right away. So it gives you that time to get that minerality and that vegetal note.
Exactly.
Super cool. Super cool. You can see the lovely iridescence again in these shells. Well, I can. I don't know if you can pick it up on the camera over there, but it's such a lovely little type of shell. Now these are the, what do you call them? French hogs. French hogs, which is a great brand name for it because it's a French style of oyster, the austere edgeless, European. Look at the size of that hinge. This is one, if I saw this at the World Championship, that's one of the oysters I'd want to open up. That's a easy peasy, right? Even this one's good. That one's good.
Just look how beefy those shells are too. You can see all that growth on them just building.
And the fluting. And are you tumbling these?
No, they're in rack and bag.
The rack and bag.
They'll get flipped occasionally.
Do you do the bash? You take the.
No, we do not bash those guys.
Baseball bats, and we bash these things around. Like, what is going on? That's great.
Those are a 4-year-old oyster.
Yeah.
So it takes a while to get them up to that size.
Now these ones, because they're called flats because they have flat top to it and very deep cup. But technically, you have to come in at a flat angle as well. I find when you're
You wanna
opening the
ride
oyster.
that top
Whereas you're going to, something like this, you're going to match the angle of that shell. So I'm coming in at this angle to pop into this hinge, where this one I was like, oh, I got to go this way, because I find as well, there's going to be a process on this and a recess on the bottom. The recess is the bottom part of the hinge, and the process sometimes can deep right down and becomes this sort of roadblock for your knife. So let's see, but the shell is beefy enough to sort of handle it. Here we go. I think the process is, hello. There we go. Big adductor muscle, I'm going to anticipate. You've got a ridge for the muscle as well. Like it's ridged there.
Yeah, it is beautifully shucked.
That hinge is fantastic. It's a more difficult oyster to open. It just technically is. But once you get through that hinge and however you want to open it, the result is this. That's a pretty nice, I love this, the squared out pocket.
Yeah.
You don't even have a pocket on this one. Some of the East Coast and West Coast will come with a little bit of shelf and the oyster sets underneath. This oyster does not necessarily go that way. But there's a, look at the fat ruffling right there. Fantastic. Let's see this one.
Yeah, and these are another one of those rare treats where I think there's only maybe 2 other farms who are actively doing these in the U.S.
Yeah.
There's wild ones, I think, out of Mass, and then there's another grower in Washington. But other than that, it is a rare find. So if you see these on the menu, I would definitely order these oysters.
This is, I'm not even going to move this. I'm going to move this. I don't know if you can see this in the sunshine right there. Right here, you can see the cilia, the tentacles, the little parts that help take the phytoplankton down to the belly. Fantastic little piece visually, and they're, you know, gorgeous for a mid-May. And you can see the heart valve. You get a clear view of that heart valve right there.
Yeah, I'm very surprised that these guys are still looking good this time of year. In our water has been fairly warm for this year.
And there's no, I don't see any sign. Look at the mantle on this one, eh? Like, I'm gonna have to hold that up to show it. Fantastic. Here we go, let's go in.
Cheers.
There's a, oh. 2 things I'm gonna go bonkers on. Shell structure on this is fantastic. Very firm, really deep cup to it, produces a really fat, meaty oyster. Big brine up front, lovely little kiss of the ocean. The tannic is coming through first. Then we're getting into the vegetals and it's drawing out right there on the tannic palate.
No,
as far as metals go, I'm not even thinking whether it's copper or tin, it's just a tannic minerality.
Exactly. It's just kind of getting you in that little black part. But
yeah,
it's not overly brassy or, you know, sometimes I describe them as like, you know, a real hoppy IPA, but these ones, not so much.
It could have the bitterness of the hoppiness, that's what comes through. Again, the modeling on the inside, loving that type of thing. But what I love on flats, you can see this structure here.
That's super cool.
It's where the vent is, or where it vents in and out. I only see it on the flats. On some of the main flats, very pronounced, and it's like teeth. And I think I've seen it. If you Google search teeth on oysters or oyster shell, you'll actually see some. And again, it's like, this is the process, this is the recess. They'll sit in between each other on the top and the bottom. So work like that. I don't know whether it's just for a flow of water action, but it's very pronounced here. And where's your top shell? It's slightly pronounced here. You can see that one, but you can hear it.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Can you hear that?
I've never noticed
marimbas.
For that.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things. Shuckers are weird. We notice at the aftermath because you're growing it, packing it, shipping it. You don't see what's inside. Life is like a box of oysters. Gorgeous, gorgeous oyster. And now we go back to the Olympias as a final round, but then we'll go back and try everything else. So we've had everything go under the sun, four of the 5 species, which is fantastic. You can see the color of the gonad right here. It's just big, fat, and pronounced. So it's getting to the point of ready for spawn. Whoop. Another one of those mudders. That's okay. Mother Nature loves eating oysters too.
Yes, sir.
What was that, do you think, that took that?
I think a lot of times it's the green crabs that'll get in there and start picking away.
So you have green crabs too, yeah?
Yeah, it's definitely an invasive species, but they are all over the place.
They are. Oh, look, they have the
Oh, they got it too.
it's got to be an Ostera
Yeah.
situation. Osteria. I got to work on my Latin one day. Can't even. Where's the cheers? I can't find it.
You're right on going back. I actually feel like I'm getting more pronounced flavor out of these guys.
I think because we popped this one,
Yeah.
the flat, and we went back to this where we got the tannic, the minerality, it helps enhance the next one because we went off clean palate on the first one.
No, exactly.
Interesting. That doesn't normally happen, but you know, it's nice to sort of think about it as well and see how it goes. This actually worked really well in the sense of starting and then finishing with it, because again, we see the difference of clean versus
Yeah. No,
multiple oysters, and maybe stacking on top of oyster will help the more complex ones.
Exactly.
Well, we're going to continue eating here, and we can watch our seagull friends. But thank you very much from Hog Island for bringing me out here and having a great time. And keep on shucking, or keep
Yeah.
on growing the oyster. I'll keep on shucking. We'll do something like that.